You're listening to The Reclaimed Life, a podcast about recognizing manipulation, reclaiming your voice, and rebuilding a life that actually feels like your own. I'm Rachel Paxton, an author, ordained chaplain, and certified mental health coach. And each week, I'll explore the patterns, dynamics, and turning points that help people rediscover who they truly are. Today, I want to talk about something I think many people experience without fully understanding: why rest can feel unsafe. Because have you ever noticed that sometimes life finally slows down and instead of feeling peaceful, you feel anxious, restless, uncomfortable, maybe even guilty? Maybe you finally have a quiet evening and suddenly your thoughts get louder. Maybe you sit down to rest and immediately start mentally scanning everything you should be doing. Maybe nothing is actively wrong, but your body still feels tense. Your mind still feels alert. You feel like you should be preparing for something, fixing something, anticipating something. And sometimes people assume that means there's something wrong with them, that they're bad at resting, that they just need more discipline, more peace, or more faith. But lately I've been wondering if, for many people, rest feels difficult not because they're failing, but because somewhere along the way, their nervous system learned that being on was necessary. I think this happens more often than people realize. Sometimes it comes from chronic stress, sometimes trauma, sometimes emotional instability, sometimes spiritual pressure, sometimes growing up in environments where people learn to anticipate moods, prevent conflict, or carry emotional responsibility far too young. Sometimes it comes from spending years trying to keep everything together, trying to make sure everyone else is okay, trying to stay ahead of problems, trying to avoid pain. And after enough time, hyper-awareness starts feeling normal. Being emotionally alert becomes normal. Constant thinking becomes normal. Preparation becomes safety. Control becomes safety. And slowing down, that can start to feel deeply unfamiliar. I think this is why some people finally get rest and still cannot relax, because rest and safety are not always the same thing to the nervous system. You can physically stop moving while internally still feeling completely on. And honestly, I think this confuses a lot of people because they think, why can't I just relax? Why do I feel guilty sitting still? Why am I anxious when nothing is wrong? Why do I feel like I should always be doing something? But what if the real question is, what did your mind learn rest meant? Because if you spent years emotionally bracing, years waiting for the other shoe to drop, years anticipating moods, conflict, disappointment, criticism, or instability, calm can feel strange. Peace can feel unfamiliar. Sometimes stillness itself feels vulnerable. Because when people live in chronic stress long enough, the nervous system adapts. It learns, stay alert, stay prepared, think ahead, don't relax too much. Something bad could happen. And this can show up in ways people don't even notice at first. Feeling guilty when resting, struggling to enjoy vacations, always needing to be productive, feeling uncomfortable when things are calm, overthinking during quiet moments, feeling anxious when there's finally nothing urgent to solve. Sometimes even creating pressure internally because pressure feels familiar. And honestly, I think a lot of people quietly believe if I stop paying attention, something bad will happen. If I stop carrying this, everything will fall apart. If I let my guard down, I'll get hurt. And that makes sense, because at some point, maybe staying mentally prepared really did help you survive. Maybe hyper awareness protected you. Maybe being emotionally responsible kept things stable. Maybe anticipating problems helped you feel safer. But survival strategies are not always sustainable forever, and healing often involves learning what safety feels like again. Not perfectly, not overnight, but slowly. And I think this is where the spiritual side becomes really important. Not in a shame filled, trust God better kind of way, not in a performative, pray harder kind of way. I mean slowly learning surrender, learning that rest is not irresponsibility, learning that peace is not laziness, learning that we're human, that we cannot control every outcome, cannot protect ourselves from every pain, cannot mentally rehearse our way into certainty. And maybe this has been humbling for me lately. Sometimes what feels like wisdom is actually fear trying to keep us safe. Fear of uncertainty, fear of pain, fear of being caught off guard, fear of things falling apart. But constantly carrying pressure does not actually give us control, it only exhausts us. I think the Bible talks about rest and surrender so much because human beings were never created to carry the emotional weight of everything. Not because God is asking us to stop caring, but because we were never meant to carry the whole world alone. And if rest feels hard for you right now, if slowing down feels uncomfortable, if your mind feels like it never fully switches off, I just want to gently say, maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe your nervous system learned survival so well that peace still feels unfamiliar. And maybe healing begins there. Slowly learning that you are safe enough to exhale, safe enough to stop rehearsing disaster, safe enough to stop carrying outcomes you were never meant to control, safe enough to rest. Thank you so much for being here today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need it too. And as always, take what's helpful, leave what isn't, and remember, you do not have to carry what you were never meant to carry alone. Thank you for listening to The Reclaimed Life. If something in this episode resonated with you, you're not alone. Many people are beginning to recognize unhealthy patterns in relationships, systems, and environments, and discovering that reclaiming their voice is possible. In future episodes, I'll explore topics like recognizing manipulation, understanding narcissistic dynamics, rebuilding self-trust, and learning how to create a life that actually feels like your own. If you'd like to explore more of these ideas, you can visit my website at thereclaimlifepodcast.com, where I share additional writing, resources, and future episodes of the show. Until next time, take a moment to listen to your intuition, trust what you're beginning to see, and remember that reclaiming your life often begins with one honest question. This is The Reclaimed Life.